Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephen Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait.
Yes, you are. And this is the On the Sports Lines NFL Training Camp Edition, the long-delayed NFL Training Camp Edition. So in August, this August, there is a lot of sports on the calendar currently. We have pretty much every major sport going on except football, but we're going to preview the upcoming football season, or whatever is going to be left of the football season. It's all things pigskin tonight. But first, the story that we've been talking about all week in the news, and that is the fact that the game that we love on Saturdays may be delayed for a long while in certain conferences. This past Tuesday, the Big Ten and Pac-12 were the first conferences to delay their season to the spring, if that is physically possible. And while the ACC and SEC still haven't said anything yet, they're still planning right now to do everything as normal. And Big 12 has actually said, we're going ahead with our fall season, and our doctors have told us that everything is going to be fine. You would think eventually everybody is going to fall in line. But the result of all of this may be that the sport that is tied to this over on Saturdays will be non-existent this fall, and the NFL will sop up the Saturday games like a little loaf of bread. There's a lot of ramifications for this, Jay. What are they? Let's start it off.
I got to say, guys, from the start, I didn't honestly see how a season could be played this fall. Look, I understand the perspective of players like Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence, who believe that being on campus is actually safer for most of them as opposed to being in their own communities, which may not be adhering to mask wearing, social distancing protocols. So they feel they are less likely to catch the virus if they are in school. And sure, you can keep football players in a bubble during training camp, and most of them will probably follow the protocols because the season and their teammates' safety is on the line. But if the campus is open in any shape, manner, or form for classes, then you have an entire community of 18 to 22-year-olds who think they're invincible and are going to want to go out and party and do things, the other things that are foolish in the climate of a pandemic that is nowhere near under control in most of the country. To me, guys, that's an outbreak that could shut down an entire team. Look, we know the players want to play. I've read stuff that, read all the stuff that's come on under the hashtags, we are united and we want to play. And I agree with most of it. And we know the coaches want to play, and we, the fans, want to see them play. But, for college football fans, guys, so much of their lives center around those Saturday afternoons. But, guys, these kids are more than just jerseys. They're the future of the nation, and they need to be protected often from themselves, especially since most of them will not be playing on Sundays in the near future. And now with this new information coming out about athletes who contract COVID, even ones who are asymptomatic and recover just fine, can be susceptible to the heart ailment myocarditis, which has already claimed the lives of 2 college athletes. How can the SEC, Big 12, and ACC continue to hold the lines on starting their seasons? How can the Big 12 say that the information they have from their medical experts doesn't give them pause? Are they not seeing what the Big 10 and the Pac-12 saw, or are they just not wanting to see it? Look, I understand there's a lot of money at stake. College football is the cash cow for most athletic departments in the Power 5 conferences. So much as the university presidents, administrators, and coaches will say this is all about keeping players safe, and I don't doubt they want that. But with all the money the schools stand to lose, you're clueless if you don't think it's a huge factor in these schools wanting a season. I'm just wondering how long they're going to wait, before they fall in line behind the Big 12, Big 10, and the Pac-12 and postpone the season at least for the fall. Look, I understand the logistics of playing 2 seasons in a single calendar year will be challenging, and a lot will have to get worked out, and I don't know how wise it may or may not be. But, what the hell have people who've been running these schools and their athletic departments been doing since March? How could they not have been talking about scenarios and starting to develop plans for the possibility that the season could be impacted? Looks to me like they took the ostrich approach, stuck their heads in the sand, and like the president, hoped it would go away when the weather got warmer. And they stuck their heads so far into the sand that now they can't get it out of their collective asses. And that's why we are where we are, guys, with the possibility of a real college football season teetering on the brink of not happening, not even potentially in the spring, let alone this fall.
You know what? Watching this whole thing about the college football, it gives you a microcosm of what's been going on in this country as a whole. The total lack of leadership. Mark Emmert, who is, the head of the NCAA, could have easily stepped in and kind of put the kibosh, one way or the other, put the kibosh once and for all. We wouldn't be discussing whether they should play or not. He could have easily stepped in and say, you know what, it's not safe. we got to protect the students first. We're not going to play a full season. But you know what he did? Like our president did, instead of being a leader, he deferred it to the institutions, and obviously it has created a big mess. And now you have the Big 12 who wants to play. You got two of the Power 5 conferences who are postponing their seasons. Now you have it's a big collective mess. And at the end of the day, yeah, it comes down to money for obvious reasons. And guys like Trevor Lawrence, yes, they want to play, but we're talking about those are like guys who have a future in the NFL in the next few years. What about the hundreds of football players who don't have a future in the National Football League? At the end of the day, they are the ones who are taking a risk of having to play a full contact sport in the middle of a pandemic. Then you have to think about the logistics that not all these universities have the budgeting to test everyone every day. And some of these universities are in states where there's a lack of testing, a lack of contact tracing as it is. And on top of that, we're seeing major league players, we're seeing players in Major League Baseball and the NBA who can't behave themselves. These are grown adults, and we expect 18 to 22-year-old young men to fall in line. It's kind of silly. We saw what happened with Rutgers. I mean, the whole football program pretty much quarantined because of our campus party. It only took one campus party to pretty much shut down the entire program. It's just like all around. It's another case of putting money above safety, and we're seeing this play out in college football right now, because it's like, what about these athletes? And one of them gets sick, are the universities going to be liable for one of these student athletes to be, if they get sick, they get COVID, and in some cases maybe develop a severe case, they have to be hospitalized for several weeks on end. I mean, when kids go off to school, I know this happened to me, and of course Jay and Rabbi yourselves, the first thing our parents want to know is, can we trust the school to keep the kids safe? Well, what kind of message does that send when you're ready to send them out to play a full contact sport, all because of dollar signs, and you're not even guaranteed the safety of the players? I mean, we see, at least in the professional ranks, there are unions that can at least negotiate safety protocols. The college athletes do not have that. And this is what the big mess is piling up, because it's like you're putting dollars above safety. And we've seen enough of that in this country, where we're putting money and we're putting schools and all this other stuff. We're putting money above everything else, and it's backfiring in a horrible way. We've seen it the last several weeks in this country, and now we're starting to see it in college right now.
I'm ashamed of both of you, and here's why. You're mentioning logical things. Yes, there are issues going on. Yes, it is unsafe for people to play. Yes, schools would rather lose football for the year than be sued by two people who have possibly been severely injured or hurt by COVID. You've all mentioned that well and good. But I'm also going to mention a point by Anthony. Mark Emmert can't do anything about college football. College football's postseason isn't even an NCAA postseason, which all of their postseasons got banned today by Mark Emmert. No, it's really the Big Five conferences. There is no uniformity whatsoever, and they can all make their separate decisions. 1 week ago, there was no talk of this. The Big Ten was ready for their season. The Pac-12 was ready for their season. And the ACC, SEC, and Big 12, again, will probably fall in line at the end of everything else. But, yeah, it's a logical decision not to play. Because, and I think you two have also said it, college athletes and college people do not know any better. Nope. They want to play, but they think that if they stay home and don't have a structured atmosphere, they're more likely to get COVID. No, you're staying home. That's a more structured atmosphere. You won't get COVID that way because you'll follow everything and you won't have any peers to pressure you whatsoever. I expect all conferences again to cancel the 2021 season. We don't know what COVID will be in March and April. And if I'm an NFL, like we said, if I'm an NFL draft prospect, I'm not even thinking about playing spring football.
No.
If there is no governing body of the NCAA, and if there's no real rights of the student athlete, there's no reason to even think about really putting your body out there and playing in 2020. Also, to address I actually kind of feel for the conferences that still want to play. They are cash cows. They want to take a risk, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine to take a risk. I think the Big Ten and Pac-12 again should not be commended for what they did. They just saw a bunch of information on Saturday. Like I said, conference schedule was on Thursday. Saw information on Saturday. Cancel the season Tuesday. How the hell does that help the student athlete if you're not making a decision months in advance? So I expect the Big 12, the ACC and the SEC to eventually cancel their seasons, but there still should be some factors into it. They still should think about it, and we're going to not have college football in 2020. I think it's pretty.
Yeah, and Jay mentioned this too. I mean, they've had literally 6 months to the day the NCAA National Basketball Tournament was canceled to start kind of thinking about planning ahead and what exactly, how are we going to get college football started. It just felt like they kind of went on a wishful thinking that it'll go away in a couple of weeks or a couple of months and didn't really put any kind of, plan together and to make, even a abbreviated season where you're just playing conference games, maybe 8 games or whatnot, pleasable, in a safely manner, and it just seemed like they wasted several months.
It's not like they seem like they did waste it. I mean, the perfect example of if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And Rabbi, to your point about Thursday to Saturday to today, here's what happens. Because this is a novel coronavirus, data and information on its effects is constantly changing. And the Big Ten commissioner put it pretty solidly when he says, we put the schedule out, because we put the schedule out. It was never written in stone. If things change, we were obviously going to adjust based on any new information that we got. And they got information that scared them. And you know what? Their first job is to protect these kids.
Of course it is, but you didn't actually say any of that. You put together this whole big shebang. Here's the schedule. Let's put it out on Twitter. This just shows that the college athlete is the least important thing to the NCAA. That's very simple as that.
Well,
I can understand what you're
for
saying.
Decades.
I know we've known that for decades, but I can completely understand that the NCAA, that the Big Ten saw this information. But to go again from Thursday to Tuesday and say, oh, we got this information, let's just completely cancel the season, is bogus. And honestly, I think you guys are kind of not seeing the big issue here. It just shows how much of a cluster the NCAA is and has been for years.
And we know that.
We know that, but this is kind of a reaffirmation of everything.
Yes,
and right
that's
now,
what it is.
And right
That's
now,
what it is.
NCAA,
I think they made the right decision. I just think it's something that would have been easier to go down if they'd been talking about all of these scenarios for the last 6 months instead of, as I said, sticking their head in the sand.
Well, they kicked the can down the road, and I understand why they kicked the. I understand why they kicked the can down the road. And that's why
they look like that, and that's why they have egg all over their face in certain areas.
If you were in that situation too, if it was April 3rd, would you start coming up with plans, or would you think that maybe this will go away in July and August?
When did baseball start? Pretty much right after everything got shut down, they started having conversations.
And they all failed. And they all 100% failed.
You are at least talking about you are at least having those conversations. And nobody who has any authority in college football in any of the damn conferences was talking about this. They should have been, and they weren't. And it's just further proof of just how much of a cluster, as you put it, the NCAA is, especially when it comes to college football. And I will say this, in the wake of this, college basketball people have started having these conversations because they don't want to be in the same situation as their football brethren.
Yeah, and I think it's come down to almost a doomsday scenario that all sports should really be thinking about the possibility of a bubble. And there's ways that's not even possible. But again, it's college athletes. You can't just put them in a bubble and expect them to enjoy another 3 months. All right. I'm done with talking about football.
We live in a bubble. It's called House University.
They're all bubbles. They're all bubbles.
Years?
They're all bubbles. Then technically all college places are bubbles, but enough with that. I don't want to talk about this anymore because there's actual football on the field with professional sports leagues that are going on with their 2020 season, even though they have some sort of plan. But we'll get to that later on. The New York Giants are going on a fourth coach in 6 years in former Patriots special team coordinator Joe Judge. And the Giants are looking for the success that has evaded them. This is probably one of the lowest points of their organization. They've had 4 consecutive non-playoff campaigns and double-digit losses each year. But the future is bright, right? Hey. Let's start with you, Jay. Quarterback Daniel Jones has had some ups and downs in year number 1. This will be the first year that he started from day 1 of training camp. What are the expectations?
Well, I mean, you guys have heard me talk about this for years on this show, that normally year 2 is where you see a quarterback make the big leap. Now, Daniel Jones has been in an offense, if you've been in an offense for a year, your quarterback is more comfortable, the game starts to slow down. However, much like Sam Darnold last year, Daniel Jones's year 2 will be year 1 in a brand new offense, which will mean he's been in 3 different offenses in the last 3 years, counting his final season at Duke. So any continuity and comfort is gone. He's starting from scratch again under new Giants offensive coordinator Jason Garrett. Now, Pat Shurmur ran a West Coast-style offense, which is schematically very different from the version of the Air Coryell offense that Garrett runs, which mixes deep passing attack with a power running game. Now, Garrett has been flexible with the scheme, and as he said to reporters during his video conference with the media this week, quote, "We certainly have a system of football that's been in place for a long time, but it's also a system that's evolved through the years, and it's evolved based on the people we have on our team. There have been times in the past we've thrown the ball a lot. There have been times in the past we've run the ball a lot. One thing that's been consistent is we want to attack defenses in different ways." And in his 6 seasons, the Cowboys ranked, in his 6 seasons as a play caller, the Cowboys ranked the top 5 in offensive efficiency twice and top half of the league 4 times. Look, I think what you're going to see, since there's some similarities in talent, the plays that Garrett ran for Zeke Elliott and Jason Witten can be run for Saquon Barkley and Evan Ingram. So I think you should expect aggressive attempts downfield, the presence of a run game fueled by a workhorse running back and tight ends that make plays up the middle of the field, both of which will be helpful for Jones as he learns this new offense. What will be interesting to see is how often Jones and Darius Slayton, who really started to develop some chemistry last season, are able to hook up on those downfield shots. So Garrett hasn't called plays since 2012, and installing a new offense is challenging when you have a normal offseason into training camp. So doing it via Zoom calls with no OTAs, no mini camps, and now no preseason games will be a hell of a challenge. But Garrett does like what he's seen and what he's gotten to know about Jones in their conversations, interactions. That he likes the fact that Jones is a football guy. He's prepared. He's always studying, always has great questions. And when you have that kind of approach, Garrett believes in with that kind of attitude. And if you have some ability, you're going to keep growing and getting better every day. Now, Jones has had a solid rookie season, completed almost 62% of his passes, which was a higher mark than in each of Eli's first 5 seasons. A little over 3,000 yards, 24 scores, 12 picks. And an interesting stat, guys, is that 22+% of his attempts were into tight windows, and that was the 3rd highest mark of any first-string quarterback. In other words, Shurmur's scheme was not creating a lot of easy throws or open windows for him. Obviously, the big negatives with Jones was ball security. 18 fumbles, 11 lost, and his propensity to hold the ball too long. 33% of Jones's plays were turnover-worthy. That meaning if not for drops by DBs on potential interceptions or penalties wiping him out, he would have a lot more negative plays. So far, from what the videos the Giants have released of Jones's offseason work, he has made a conscious effort to handle the ball better in his pocket, starting with having his left hand glued to the ball when he's moving around. It's a start. According to Pro Football Focus, 71% of Jones's look distributions were his first read. 67% of throws made to that read had an accuracy of 56%. Now, those stats aren't too surprising. As coming from Duke, the majority of his throws only required a single read. As he progresses in the NFL, he's going to have to be able to go through multiple reads, something he struggled a bit with last season and will be the critical element in whether he makes that next step in his development. He took 38 sacks last year and was sacked or hit on 27% of his dropbacks, 33rd in the NFL. Not all of it's on the O-line. Jones averaged 2.85 seconds from dropback, in terms of releasing the ball in his dropbacks. That's 13th longest average time among quarterbacks. Anytime he held the ball for 2.6 seconds or more, he only completed 47% of his passes versus 53% he completed when he took 2.5 seconds or less. Now, while that in itself isn't a cause for concern, the fact that Jones's pass attempts mainly came on his first read is. Per Pro Football Focus's 2019 quarterback annual, Jones threw his first read on 67% of his pass attempts, going to the next read only 13% of the time. Look, getting the ball out earlier, either in a check down or just throwing it away to avoid a sack, that comes with experience and recognizes the rush, recognizing coverages, getting through his progressions faster, all of which we'll hopefully see the benefit of during this season, a lot based on the experience he had going through it last year. We've seen his pinpoint accuracy. We've seen that he's willing to fit the ball into tight windows and will give receivers opportunities to make contested catches. He checks the mobility and escapability boxes for a modern-day quarterback. He never stops keeping his eyes down the field, and he's not afraid to attack a defense. There's no doubt about his strength of character and his competitiveness. And as I said before, he never seems to think the moment is too big from him. He believes in himself and a quarterback needs to in order to be a success in the NFL. All of these things, guys, lead me to believe that even though he's learning a new offense, the experience of going through a full season almost should accelerate that learning process. And I think you will see, if not the big jump, enough of one to give us Giant fans reason to hope that we really have found the next franchise quarterback and Eli 2.0, which is what the Giants were looking for in the first place.
Yeah, but they wanted Eli 2.0. The good thing about Eli being Eli 2.0 is, again, the accuracy is a ton better, but what quarterback doesn't throw for a 60% completion percentage now if you don't get benched?
Well,
but also, you have two really good deep threats on this team in Golden Tate and Slayton. It's really, I think, going to be about how Sterling Shepard provides a security blanket in that 10 to 15-yard range. If he doesn't provide a security blanket, Jones is going to get sacked a tremendous amount. Anthony, any thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, we saw flashes of Daniel Jones last year, particularly in games against Washington, against Philadelphia, where he has good points, but also it's about, obviously taking care of the football. He has to cut down the turnovers. It will help if he has a healthy Saquon Barkley come out in the backfield, not just has a runner, but has another receiving option. And obviously having guys like Evan Ingram and Golden Tate for a whole season. Remember, Golden Tate missed the first 4 games because of a suspension last year.
Right.
And obviously Daniel Jones did not have him for the first 2 games of his starts. So that was a big thing as well. Throwing Slayton and hopefully Sterling Shepard, because he's had problems with concussions the last few years, can stay healthy, stay on the field. The Giants have a good depth of weapons on offense, and it depends on the stability of the offensive line as well. That's another overlooked Daniel as far as Daniel Jones. But if everything falls in place, Jones can really have a big leap forward in year 2. And like I said, give the Giants fans and the organization hope for the next 3-5 years.
Be interesting to see, Rabbi, with Nate Solder opting out, Andrew Thomas, the rookie, who was originally going to start the season on the right side, now starts the season on the left side, where many figured he would eventually end up. So his learning curve starts now. So that'll be interesting to watch, too, because we all know the relationship between a quarterback and his left tackle in terms of staying upright.
And his learning curve starts immediately in game 1 when they've had no time on the practice field, but we'll get to that later.
Yes,
okay, so the Giants have a new head coach in Joe Judge. Haven't seen too much of him during training camp because I feel like everything at training camp has been pretty much kept secret because there's everything that's basically been going on around me that has not been football. And again, not having preseason games, I think really, really hurts the NFL as a whole. I think in September, we'll think about it again. I just hate hot take land. That's how NFL has basically become now in July and August. But enough about that. It's Joe Judge's first season. And I'm curious to see if the Patriot way gets installed in this team. This team, he learns off of Bill Belichick, but then again, you've had a lot of people like Eric Mangini, Romeo Crennel, Charlie Weiss, and Josh McDaniels when he was with Denver. I know he might be a good head coach now. They have not been good head coaches installing in the Patriot way. In fact, there really hasn't been a good head coach that has really got out of Bill Belichick's shadow. The best example I could think of is Bill O'Brien, and Bill O'Brien is pretty much right now the laughingstock of every single coach out there because of his offseason.
More so for his failings as a GM than as an actual head coach.
Yeah, but still, it qualifies into the head coaching world, and you think with a lot of talent on this team, they would have made at least an AFC championship by now, and they have not. Anyway, the Giants have hired 2 people in the last 5 years, though. That's all the bad stuff. There's a ton of good stuff around there, and that's because he has nothing to really go up against, because I've seen 2 of the worst head coaches ever in my entire tenure over here, Ray Hanley aside, over the last few years. Ben McAdoo, who had made the playoffs in his first year, was just too hot-headed, not a media-friendly coach, and was one of the classic people who, if the ship was sinking, he would immediately be the first one off the ship, hog all the life jackets, and then immediately swim to the boat. He was not even close to a leader, and I think he was almost a jerk. I would say something else, but I'm trying to not curse on the show. Anyway, Pat Shurmur was just never a good head coach. You don't hire somebody who was a failed head coach and expect him to be a good head coach again. Pat Shurmur is a lifelong coordinator, and he just couldn't fit the position. So Joe Judge has a low-pressure 2020 to start off because we're in the era of COVID. This is not a season that's going to be normal. If the Giants go 6-10, you can blame just the preparation. If the Giants go 9-7, you can blame the lack of preparation. There's no pressure on Joe Judge this year.
No.
There's a ton of pressure on Dave Gettleman, however, a man who has said a ton of things in the media, like I will never trade Odell Beckham Jr., and then has traded Odell Beckham Jr. In his introductory press conference way back in January of 1945. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it was 2020. Judge said, we will play fast, we will play downhill, we will play aggressive, we will punch you with the nose for 60 minutes, we will play every play like it has a history and a life of its own with a relentless competitive attitude. We will play fundamentally sound. We will not beat ourselves. That is our mission right here.
That's every coaching cliche in the
it is tremendously every it is tremendously every coaching cliche. But I did not see anybody who you would run a wall through. You wouldn't run through a wall for Ben McAdoo. You wouldn't run through a wall for Pat Shurmur. You can run through a wall for Joe Judge. And I know, being a Giants fan, I'm extremely optimistic. You don't have too many people who have this Saban-Belichick connection like Judge does. It's a better option than what the McAdoo and Shurmur's is. There is a lot that we're going to find out about Joe Judge in year 1. If we have a full year 1, we'll see what happens. I am optimistic, which automatically means if you talk to me a month from now, I will be pessimistic. Anyway, there are a lot of Giants under the microscope in 2020. Anthony, pick one.
You know what? My play under the microscope is going to be Leonard Williams, the defensive end that the Giants traded for the Jets for a draft pick last year. Now, keep in mind, when they made this trade, the Giants were 2-6. So you mentioned Dave Gettleman. He's done a lot of things and said a lot of things. This is one of those head-scratching moves that pundits and Giant fans alike kind of said, like a big WTF. I mean, in the 8 games with the Giants, Williams had a grand total of 13 solo tackles and a half of a sack. Not a full sack, a half a sack. That's like a hockey assist in far as being a pass rusher.
And they're not always credited, and they always credited very much the same way. So you might not even have gotten that half a sack.
Yeah, I mean, it's the hockey assist for pass rushers, pretty much. We get a half of a sack. But for all that, the Giants franchise tagged him for $60 million for the season. A grand total. He had 21 tackles for 2 teams last season, both playing at MetLife Stadium for the entire 2019 season, and he gets a franchise tag and will get $60 million for the season. Now, granted, he has been inconsistent throughout his career. He made the Pro Bowl in 2016 with the Jets with 7 sacks. That's a career high. Since then, the last 3 years, he's had a grand total of 7.5 sacks. So pretty much he's pretty much just played up to the sack total he had in 1 year in the last 3. Look, he's very athletic. He's a big guy. He's been training with Richard Seymour in the offseason to try to kind of, be a better pass rusher. But here's the thing. It's not the fact that he's not getting the pressure. He's not finishing off the play. And that's been a frequent issue with Leonard Williams. He's getting to the quarterback. He's not bringing the quarterback down and finishing the play. And that's been a big problem with him pretty much his whole career. Now, when he joined the Giants, he did make the pass rush slightly better, even though the Giants' defense is still a bit of a mess. But you figure if he can pick it up, if he can actually get a whole sack for himself instead of just assisting in one, you pair him with Dexter Lawrence and Devlin Tomlinson, who did kind of come on strong late in the year. And the Giants, they can have something of a pass rush up front. And that's been our biggest issue the last few seasons is the lack of getting quarterback pressure. They've been in the bottom third of the league in defense the last 3 seasons. And a lack of a pass rush has definitely been part of it, especially now when you have a young secondary that's not going to have DeAndre Baker for a lot of reasons we don't have time to get into on the show. So for Leonard Williams, you know what? He's going to be a free agent more than likely after the season. I can't see the Giants bringing him back unless he go on some kind of Joey Bosa like sack barrage for 2020, and he's going to need to because he's playing for it's a contract year.
Look, honestly, I agree with you 100%, Anthony. I scratched my head the day the trade was announced, and I've been scratching my head ever since. I have no idea what Gettleman was thinking. Richard, this guy has always been more potential than actually production. And you talk about him, having to put up sacks and be a pass rusher. Hell, I would settle for him putting up a Richard Seymour-like season. Talk about the guy he trains with. You need to see something that gives you reason to believe that the potential can equal production down the line. The Giants are not deep on the defensive line, not like they were, back in the Kaplan days or even before that. They need to generate a pass rush somehow. They play in a passing league. You play in a division that has decent quarterbacks. You do not, like you said, young cornerbacks, safeties who coverage is not their primary thing. You need to be able to generate a pass rush if you are going to stay competitive in this division and in this league. And, can we mark it down that Marcus Golden is going to put up 10 sacks again? No. So this dude has to bring it. And he's going to be the guy that, if it doesn't happen, this could be the move that finally runs Gettleman out of town, Rabbi.
Yeah, and remember, he's playing off a new defensive coordinator in Patrick Graham. And who knows? I know Leonard Williams showed up to camp with a sore hamstring, so that's going to limit his reps. And when asked if the Giants would be playing with a 4-3 or a 3-4, of course, Patrick Graham answered yes. So who knows where Leonard Williams is going to fit on this team in 2020? And isn't it funny, outside of Juju Smith-Schuster, Jay, how USC players have failed in the NFL over the last few years?
Stop it.
That's why you're really pissed off at him. Let's be honest.
I hate it when guys who come out of the Trojan program who have produced in that program enough to warrant their draft pick level and that production does not continue over. It does often enough as proof that USC actually does produce good football players, but when guys like Williams happen, it really irks me.
I figured it did.
And you know what? Juju, that is all about Ben not being around. Don't even go there.
No. I gave Juju credit. No. I gave Juju credit. That was how I said despite.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah.
No, like I said, outside of Juju, nothing else. Anyway, speaking of USC, let's actually talk about a bigger exercise of futility, and that's the New York Jets. The 2010s ended up with a whopping 0 playoff appearances, and only a single winning season with a ton of Fitzmagic. And with stars leaving this team like Jamal Adams via trade, it shows what we all know: the Jets culture has not been a winning one as we enter year 2 of the Adam Gase experiment. Jay, USC talk. Let's talk about Sam Darnold. Year 3. What are the expectations?
Year 3, but year 2 in Gase's offense. And it's the first time pretty much since his senior year in high school that Darnold will be in the same offense for the second straight year. And as I said, when we were talking about Daniel Jones, having that continuity and comfort is a key to a quarterback taking the next step in his development. And this is the year that Darnold needs to show the Jets that they have a franchise quarterback. Now, he had a strong training camp and an impressive preseason and seemed ready to make that jump that we all expected him to take last year. Then he gets mono. And we're never going to really know just how much of an impact that had on his up and down sophomore season. He had mono when he played sluggishly and lost to the Bills in the opener. He appeared healthy enough to return 4 weeks later, but wasn't quite the same for another month, which is typical when one gets mono. My nephew had it. He did not return to his usual crazy self until at least 6 months down the line. And, in the second half of the season, Darnold showed us what the Jets had been hoping they would see all year. 13 touchdowns against only 4 picks, passer rating of 93.5. Jets go 6-2. Now, overall, he improved last year in virtually every statistical category: passing yards, completion percentage, TDs, picks, passer rating from his rookie year, despite a mediocre set of weapons and an awful offensive line. There were also times, guys, and I think we've talked about this, that Adam Gase didn't seem to really help him either. The Jets ranked 31st in offensive efficiency last season, and the last 3 offenses that where Gase has called the plays have finished 31st, 26th, and 27th in efficiency. And the numbers also reveal that Darnold was making a lot of tough throws, so neither the scheme nor his supporting cast were helping him that much, as I said. His expected completion percentage was just 61.6, which ranked 36th out of 39 quarterbacks who qualified. On film, Darnold has shown he can make high degree of difficulty throws, neatly fit passes in between defenders, but he also misses too many easy completions, and there seems to be a hesitancy about his game where it feels like he doesn't always trust what he's seeing. There didn't appear to be much trust between Darnold and his receivers last season, which often led to him going through his progressions, holding the ball too long, and trying to make something happen off schedule. As a result, the dude produced negative play results, sack, fumble, or pick, on 11% of his plays, 27th among qualifying quarterbacks. He was sacked or hit on 22% of dropbacks, 26th among quarterbacks. And one reason for that was the aforementioned holding the ball too long. When Darnold got rid of the ball in 2.5 seconds or less on just 31% of his dropbacks, 36th out of 39 quarterbacks. Now, look, we all know that COVID-19 hasn't helped Darnold's development. He'll likely be playing this season with 2 new starting guys, wide receivers on the perimeter, in Denzel Mims and Rashad Perriman, and 5 new offensive linemen: Becton, Lewis, McGovern, Van Roten, and Fant. OTAs and minicamp usually build chemistry between a quarterback and his O-line and a quarterback and his receivers. Darnold didn't have any of that, and he's only now getting reps with his new weapons. Making up that much missed time is a tall task even for the most established quarterbacks. However, if slot receiver Jamison Crowder stays healthy, if TD Chris Herndon picks up where he left off in his rookie year, and Mims and Berriman, if that gamble is off, Darnold and the Jets could be fine. There are so many ifs in that equation, though it's hard to imagine New York finding much the offensive if they survive subpar play from their receivers. They did that last year. As long as the offensive line together, if this front 5 can't keep him healthy for a full season, this entire year is going nowhere. Look, the Jets need Darnold to form a better rapport with his receivers. Gase needs to give him more options to get the ball out quickly. If those things happen, and the new personnel offer even a slight upgrade, and the Jets' pass protection is better, 2020 could be a year where the needle moves forward. But with all those ifs, Darnold still enters this season as a relative unknown with a lot of expectations. He's not a bust despite what a lot of people say, and it's easy to see that if you are really looking at it. But you don't know if he'll be that next tier all-pro, be the reason you win a Super Bowl type of quarterback. The Jets need to have an answer to that at the end of this season. The worst possible thing for the Jets this year is that come February, they either A, still don't know, or 2, realize that he's not. If this season takes a terrible turn, the offense stinks, Darnold regresses or simply doesn't improve, I got to agree that Gase is going to be gone. But it also means that you'll have Darnold entering year 4 with his third head coach, learning yet another brand new offense. And still won't know if they have a franchise quarterback. More guessing, more uncertainty, and more hope. And they'll have wasted 3 years of Darnold's rookie contract and still be no closer to knowing if they have next Namath for the first time since forever.
You know, I actually take that, before we get to you, Anthony, I actually take that last half of the season kind of a little because they didn't beat any playoff teams who actually had anything to play with in that final part of the season. You can take it with a grain of salt because the competition was not that great.
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. But also, I do have to say this. You expect him to at least be Josh Allen in year 3. I know they're two completely different.
You expect him to be better than Josh Allen.
You expect him
to be Allen now has better weapons. Yeah. Allen now has better weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had better weapons last year, too. Anthony?
Well, one game sticks out to me, and that was the Monday night game against New England. Remember, he's seeing ghosts. I mean, clearly, if you don't trust your receivers, but you're seeing ghosts and cats with a friendly ghost on the other side of the ball, so you got issues. But I tell you what, having Mono, pretty much I think wrecked Sam Darnold's year 2 without question, because even when he came back in the game against Dallas, it's a game that just won, but they didn't win it because of Sam Darnold. They won because the defense is good and the Cowboys' play calling absolutely was atrocious in that game. You just saw that he really wasn't 100%. Really towards the tail end of the season. Granted, he played better. It wasn't against the best competition. Let's not give him so much credit. But yeah, you think about some of the play calling that Adam Gase that could probably be a little better. Look at the weapons. Who is he throwing the ball to? I mean, it's a big thing. Sam Darnold is not at the point in his career where he can make his receiver, make his weapons better, because only certain quarterbacks are able to do that. Like Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady can literally make guys better
throwing their receivers open.
Yeah, we throw receivers open. We've seen that, and with the Jets, and we saw even last season when they had Bobby, Anderson. Guys couldn't get off the line of scrimmage to get open, to really give Sam Darnold any trust in his receivers that he can throw the ball to. And it's going to be up to Adam Gase and the play calling to kind of maybe make things a little easier for Sam Darnold. I mean, he's, like I said, like Mono and misses so many games to start the year really did they take away from the progression that he had from year 1 to year 2, because it was almost like he had training camp, they missed all them games, and they had to basically play himself back into shape again. So now when you don't have an OTA, you don't have any preseason games, it's going to be a challenge to see what Sam Darnold can do right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's going to be on the coaching staff to help him out.
Yeah, and I'm a little surprised that Doug didn't draft any wide receivers of note, which is why I think everybody was kind of, as much as, people are talking about how good an offensive lineman Becton can be, it's why on our draft show, guys, I raged against the fact that not draft a tier 1 wide receiver, because that was something that Darnold desperately needs.
Yeah, and I think it was almost an excuse for his year 3 to fall flat. So, Adam Gase needs to go 9-7 to keep his job in 2021. I actually think the Jets have a little bit of opportunity here, because all Jets fans have complained about for the last 10 years is, Tom Brady is in our division. The Patriots are a juggernaut. The Patriots are a monster. We can't do anything against Tom Brady. He's gone. And most of the Patriots have opted out. Mm-hmm. So this is a division that's for the taking. Buffalo might be the most talented, but the Jets actually played pretty well against Buffalo last year. Almost winning game 1 and winning game 17, although Buffalo rested a couple of starters. So there's no reason why the Jets should win some games in this division. And the schedule looks okay. Gase needs to improve as an offensive genius, though. We talked about this before. Jets were actually dead last in offensive totals last year. Offensive efficiency, as Jay mentioned, 31st. There's no imagination in this offense at all. And even when Luke Falk was was in charge and when Sam Darnold was in charge. You need to throw for over 300 yards in the NFL week after week after week, and no matter who your wide receivers are. And Darnold, I believe, only did that twice last year. The coach is almost a liability to this team, and he almost makes himself the story more than he does his team, because his criticism of the head coach is the first thing you think about right now with the 2019 and 2020 Jets. And no matter what you think of Jamal Adams' tactics to leave New York, you have to wonder what the truth of the words he said about Gase actually was. As I mentioned before with Joe Judge, nobody wants to run through a wall for Adam Gase. Adam Gase is almost a divider in the locker room than he is a leader, dating back to his last years in Miami. No matter what our friend Nisa Petrilli says, Gase was never the greatest of quarterbacks, and he needs to be an inspiration to his players. Adam Gase is 30 and 35 as a head coach. 1-10-6 year in his rookie year in Miami. One playoff appearance where they got knocked by the Steelers. Adam Gase is the new Jeff Fisher of the NFL. Mediocre enough to keep his job, but not enough to go up to the next level.
Hey, if him being the next Jeff Fisher leads them to eventually getting the next McVay, I think Jet fans will take that, but they'd want it to happen sooner rather than later.
I thought you were going to say Jeff Fisher if it gets him to a Super Bowl with the Titans, but I'm talking about this version of Jeff Fisher. And that, if you think it's McVay, that means Jason Garrett's going to be not Jason Garrett, but there's no way that – I don't like Adam Gase as a coach.
You kind of made that abundantly clear.
I think Adam Gase – everybody's eyes are on Adam Gase in 2020, pun intended. And I just think that he is just another guy who should be a coordinator. If you're an offensive genius, how do you do this? How do you do this for many years in a row? You can't be this bad, and you can't blame your players. All right. Enough with the rant. Anthony, rant about Le'Veon Bell, the Jet under the microscope in 2020.
Well, you mentioned the aforementioned unimaginable creativity that was the Jet offense, and Le'Veon Bell being misused to Adam Gase's own admission. Now, by the way, he admitted this recently that he misused Le'Veon Bell, but let's be honest, it was no secret. He didn't want Le'Veon Bell in the first place, and the Jets brought him on anyway. But Bell was on the team, and excuse me, 3-time Pro Bowler, ran for a career low 789 yards on a career low 3.2 yards per carry. That is
awful.
Tim, yeah. You know what? That is Tim Tebow numbers, if you're going to go that far. But he didn't have a single run of 20 or more yards, which is for Le'Veon Bell. And, Jay, you followed him because he was a Steeler. When you have a home run hitter that can't get more than 10 yards per carry, that's not good.
No.
And then you think about his total touches, 245 carries, 66 catches. Clearly, he was not used properly because he was missed every day in Pittsburgh. Compared to the Jets, they didn't use him enough. He ran out of shotgun 43% of the time last year. He only did that 27% of the time in his final year with the Steelers where Ben Roethlisberger was more under center. And obviously his style also kind of clashed with Adam Gase's mentality of pounding the football. Le'Veon Bell is a very patient runner who literally sits and waits for blocks to develop. And there's another problem. He's going to be playing behind his third different offensive line in as many years. So, again, Le'Veon Bell's running style, how does that mesh with an O-line that because there's no OTAs, there's no preseason games, how they're going to gel as far as chemistry. And also, you think back to one game, there was a Week 8 loss. We had a season low 11 touches. It was a combination of Le'Veon Bell's lackadaisical attitude. Remember, during the offseason, there's a lot of things going on away from football. Also, Adam Gase maybe not being a football offensive genius that people are giving him credit for. That played into him having a down year. But also, here's another thing. They bring in Frank Gore, who is more of a kind of running back that Adam Gase likes to have in his offense. And Frank Gore is just not Asian at all. You know, he had 25 carries last year. He's gonna want to get the football, of course. He's not there to be a cheerleader or be a short down his back. He's there to play more than at least 60% of the time. That's going to be an issue when you have Le'Veon Bell, who's a guy you can keep on the field all the time because he's a great receiver out in the backfield. And that's something that, you know what, that could help Sam Darnold maybe run a few more screens for Le'Veon Bell and get him out there as a receiver, kind of make things easier for your quarterback. Look, Le'Veon Bell is only 28 years old. He clearly does not have the wear and tear that most running backs have at this age and at this point in his career because of his running style. He does make people miss. However, again, it falls on Adam Gase, and how does he implement Le'Veon Bell's running style and the fact that, yes, he demands a lot of touches, not just as a runner, as a receiver as well. How can you incorporate that into an offense when Adam Gase, let's be frankly, has not shown, and I guess you both have touched on it long enough, that he doesn't really have the imaginary skills to be a little bit creative with his offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange that Le'Veon Bell at the same time is an indictment of both Adam Gase and Mike Maccagnan. Maccagnan bringing him in here is proof that he and Gase were not on the same page because, as you're right, Anthony, as talented as Le'Veon Bell is, he's not the type of running back that Gase wants in his system. Gase likes a north-south guy, makes one cut, hits the hole, goes downhill, and that's Frank Gore. But at the same time, the indictment of Gase is, as you put it, and we've all put it, the lack of creativity. It's one, and this is one of the things that irks me the most about certain offensive coaches in the NFL. They are so wedded to they're my system, that they refuse to, they keep pounding round pegs into square holes instead of, you don't adjust the peg, you adjust the hole to fit what you have. And the fact that Gase, with all of the available film from Pittsburgh about how Bell was utilized, and you don't adapt some of that into your offense to take advantage of this guy's skill set, come on, man. I mean, say what you want about Le'Veon Bell and the way he's acted over the last few years. The dude can play football. He can run it. He can catch it. You can utilize him coming out of the backfield, as you said, on screens and wheel routes. You can put him out, on the perimeter as a wide receiver. He can run the full route tree as he did in Pittsburgh. Knowing what he can do, having seen it on film all of those years, and not even attempting to adapt any of that, come on, man. Like I said, it's an indictment of both of these guys. Maccagnan is GM, Gase is head coach.
Yeah, this is why. Let me mention something about Le'Veon Bell. Remember, he didn't play in 2018. So getting your legs back in 2019, going down 500 yards and going down 200 yards receiving, that's not really good, especially if, you don't have 2018 to prepare for that. Also, I think, as you mentioned before, one of the big benefits of actually not having an off season, not having preseason games, is the Bell-Gore combo. If they're both on the field at the same time, and knowing Adam Gase, they'll probably both be on the same field at the same time for probably like 4% of plays, is a big help. I think Bell should be utilized probably more as a receiver in 2020 because that could be Sam Darnold's check down guy. And if Sam Darnold has a check down guy, Sam Darnold gets better. And if Sam Darnold gets better, the Jets get better. All right, let's talk about coaches. There were not too many hires in the uncertain season of 2020, but the hires, 4, but the hires are from big named organizations, and these hires don't have an amazing legacy to follow in these new positions. And we're not talking about Matt Rule, who does have a big legacy to follow in Ron Rivera. Speaking of Ron Rivera, Anthony, tell us about the Washington football team. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah, the artist known as the Washington Redskins, as I call them nowadays. You know what? Ron Rivera was a coach that, a lot of people felt that the Giants would have kind of signed and hired because of his relationship with Dave Gettleman, going back to the Carolina Panthers days. But Ron Rivera, you think about his stint with the Panthers. He won 55% of his games, 9 seasons. Don't forget the 15-1 season that they had in 2015. Went to the Super Bowl, losing to Denver, of course. And also the development of Cam Newton. He went from rookie sensation to league MVP that year as well. So Ron Rivera has been a class act, knows how to get the best out of his guys, and obviously knows how to get them, knows how to win. However, he's going to a Washington franchise that has been a total PR nightmare, to say the least. If it wasn't for the roundabout name change, which only came because of sponsors like FedEx finally got to Daniel Snyder and told him, hey, you know what? Maybe being called a racial slur is not a great idea. Let's change the name after 87 years. If it wasn't for not one, not two, not three, not four, but 17 women, including 15, who worked for the Washington organization, coming out with sexual harassment and verbal abuse allegations over the summer. And this is off the field. And not to mention Daniel Snyder's own history of meddling and kind of interjecting himself in football operations when he doesn't need to.
He's the James Dolan of the NFL.
No, Jerry Jones is the James Dolan of the NFL.
Yeah. You can't equate Jerry Jones with James Dolan because the Cowboys win.
Yeah, back in the 1990s, but that's it.
Oh, hi, Earl. Anyway, get back to my point. Now, that's off the field. Now, on the field, you got to worry about Dwayne Haskins because there's a big question mark with him. Now, I remember last summer, actually, we were talking about our NFL draft show, and during the season, I had said that Dwayne Haskins is a guy who's not ready to start in the NFL right away. He needs time to learn. They literally threw him into the fire pit. After 4 weeks last year, he signed some social sign of promise, but he definitely showed that he wasn't ready to take the reins right away. He needed more time to kind of, be a backup, hold a clipboard, study some film. His accuracy was by far the worst, under 10 yards of any quarterback in the National Football League last season. In his final 2 games, he posted 131 rating, but only on 43 passes attempts. So that's not a high level.
Small sample size.
That's not a good sample size. By the way, Darius Geis was cut a few days ago because
who's playing running back this fall for them?
Issue. So then again, another off-the-field allegation that goes with the Washington team that affects him on the field. The only bright spot, though, however, is that he may have something with a young defense that's going to have their number 1 pick, Chase Young, Ryan Kerrigan, Montez Sweat, and Jonathan Allen. You may have a really good pass rush on your hands if used properly. So there's something there, but when you look at the mess that Ron Rivera is getting himself into, it's going to be about really changing the culture on and off the field. I mean, this is definitely not about winning as much as it's about trying to establish something of a winning mentality with this Washington franchise, who is going to be nameless for the 2020 season. It's going to be the butt of all jokes. If the player's not going to get them involved, it's going to be the lack of a name. And being called the football team that has no name, and I love a good Game of Thrones reference, the moment they take the field, like you just call them Washington. They're literally like a generic Madden NFL franchise going into the season with no name. But Ron Rivera's got his hands full. I mean, he's got a meddling owner, off the field stuff that is overshadowing, and question marks on the field. So it's definitely going to be a work in progress for Rivera going into the season.
Yeah, the 100%, Anthony. But I tell you what, guys, if there is a coach who is stepping into a brand new situation, who is better qualified to handle all of this, I don't know of anyone who is more qualified than Ron Rivera. The smartest thing, look, Daniel Snyder made a smart call by hiring him. Now he needs to make another smart call and stay out of the way. Let Rivera be the face of the franchise. This is a guy who everybody knows around the NFL as a class act. He does the right thing. He says the right things. He acts the right way. And he's as good a representative as the nameless team could ask for as they move into a new era. So this is this is an in-between season for them. It's a meaningless season for them. Nobody's expecting anything. And Rivera's primary job is to develop all of these, start developing these young guys on the field and try and get people to think better of this franchise off the field. And like I said, I don't know anybody who's more qualified. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a tough road to hoe, but I think he's the right guy for this job, both on and off the field.
I'm kind of interested to see, first of all, they still have Adrian Peterson, who is like 5 years old as a running back. Also, I'm kind of curious, the Alex Smith angle is interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
I think he could give Haskins a run for his money. And Alex Smith, if he can get the deep ball back with McLaren there, this might not be a lost season for the Redskins, because anybody could win the NFC East year after year, because it's probably the worst division right now in football, especially if you don't have a healthy Carson Wentz. Now, the Cowboys hired a new head coach after getting rid of the nightmarish mediocrity brain known as Jason Garrett in Mike McCarthy, who has a ton of credentials, which is a surprise. I mean, you haven't really seen someone with this much credentials as Cowboys head coach since Bill Parcells was hired by the team. McCarthy comes in with a 125, 77-2 record and a 10-8 playoff record, although 4 playoff wins in 1 year and 3 NFC championship losses. And I don't think the Cowboys know exactly what an NFC championship is, let alone a Super Bowl. And of course, he brings home a Super Bowl championship, which he won in Dallas 10 years ago. So he did lean on amazing QB play. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's a pretty smooth sailing when you have 2 of the best quarterbacks of all time under helm, and Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers in your 2006 to 2018 reign. There was a little bit of a falling out between McCarthy and Rodgers, and that's kind of the reason why they didn't even finish the 2018 season together, but they're going to always be linked in history. And many people think McCarthy might have underachieved as that head coach, because with that team, you probably could have won a Super Bowl, more than a few Super Bowl titles than the title that they had. He'll be on a shortish leash compared to what Jason Garrett had. However, Jerry Jones, as I mentioned, the James Dolan of the NFL, likes to hire people with the exact mindset he has. And I think Mike is definitely one of those people, and he'll have a few seasons to grow in the position. They're not going to kick him out immediately. And in the NFC East, you could have success quickly, although I still think there's a few holes in this team. Now, one of the big things is McCarthy, again, has no power as GM. Jerry Jones has the power as GM. But more importantly, they kept Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore is by far one of the best offensive coordinators in the league. Yes, you have Dak Prescott, who will be unhappy, but he'll have a chip on his shoulder trying to play for a new contract. You have the very, very well-paid Amari Cooper, who proved his worth last year as one of the best number 1 receivers in the NFL. And when he is on, the team usually wins. And you have Ezekiel Elliott, who is a very good every down back. So this offense should produce results for McCarthy. The defense just has to match up to it, and this team has to live up to expectations. Mike is going to need the very best version of 2020 for Dak, and if that's the case, Dak can be locked up to a long-term contract. I don't know if the 56-year-old McCarthy, who's really going on probably some of his last years in the NFL, wants to start training another new QB under the helm, especially in Dallas. McCarthy has won 10-plus games 8 times in his career, and yes, McCarthy has ended Dallas's season twice. The Des Bryant game, most specifically,
that's right,
and 4 years ago. And I have one simple question for you. Why didn't he get hired in 2019? You have a Super Bowl winning coach on the market, and everybody passed up on him. Is it everybody else who was dumb? Or is it because McCarthy's personality didn't fit their team? I don't know what the answer to that is, but it could be a telling sign for his time in AT&T Stadium.
You know what, Rob? I think part of it has to do with the way it ended in Green Bay, because it ended ugly. And owners are going to maybe not necessarily give a head coach who ends a relationship with a Hall of Fame quarterback that badly, they're not necessarily going to give him his next chance right out of the gate. I think a lot of people needed to, and McCarthy included, needed to have a year go by so people could digest it and, maybe kind of step back and be able to look at his entire resume to realize that he is more than just that last bad ending. And sometimes time allows people to see that, which is why he now landed a job with a elite or, well-known franchise like Dallas, whereas after 2019, maybe owners were not as willing to give him that much of a look because that ending was so fresh in their minds.
Yeah, you mentioned Mike McCarthy kind of putting together a lot of winning seasons. You think about the years that they should have won a Super Bowl. I mean, they won as a Tennessee's wild card team. But you think about the following year when they went 15-1 and Aaron Rodgers the MVP, they lost their very first playoff game to the Giants. And then you talk about the NFC Championship game in Seattle that they literally had sealed away and let that game slip away. So they've had opportunities to kind of get back to the Super Bowl, but have come up short in the postseason. And and obviously the ugly ending with in the relationship with Aaron Rodgers pretty much sealed his faith in Green Bay. Now, he goes to the Dallas. The Cowboys on paper have the most talent in the division. It seems like this every year. They're like the sexy pick to win a Super Bowl, but they've shown that they're the team that kind of leads the league in social distancing when it comes to getting to the promised land. They've done it for about 26, 27 years at this point. They've mastered it. And for whatever reason, it all comes down to Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones, being the grand poobah of everything in Dallas, seems to find a way to kind of undermine his own team's success in some capacity. If it's not doing his own, weekly talk show, if it's not, the post-game interviews, well, even the coaches don't want to speak on something, but he will. And then you're throwing the fact that, everyone else is getting big money except his own star quarterback, which is becoming a bigger issue. You wonder how that cloud is going to hang over the head of the Cowboys all season. And you got a defense that comes in with question marks. They've progressively gotten worse the last few years to a point where they couldn't stop a Philadelphia Eagles team that literally had guys off the street playing for a division title in Philadelphia late last December. So there's a lot of, like that. When you look at the Cowboys, you would think they would be on a Patriot-like run of division titles in a very weak NFC East. But I think the biggest question is that the Cowboys always seems to be their own worst enemies at some point. And much as I don't like to agree with Stephen A. Smith, and we don't need to get into that little backstory. He has a point. The Cowboys shoot themselves in the foot at some point down the line. They become their own worst enemy. They're the Y.E. Coyote. They put together the plan, and the Acme Pies backfired them on some point. They have the talent. Can Mike McCarthy generate the same success he had with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay over to Dallas, where he has all this firepower, but now he has the same. The irony is that he has the same problem that he had in Green Bay. A lot of offense, but the defense is kind of lagging behind, and that was kind of the underbelly of those great Green Bay Packers teams when they would put together 11 and 12-win seasons. So, like I said, I mean, the X factor is always going to be Jerry Jones. So what is he going to say or do that's going to kind of undermine his own team as the season progresses? And the only good news is that, you know what? You're in a 100,000-seat stadium. You might not be playing with any fans. So guess what? You don't have the luxury of fans booing you if you play pretty poorly, which happened a few times last season in Dallas.
Yeah, and also the fact that Jerry Jones is already stirring the pot on the national anthem and kneeling for it, saying we would not, basically not coming out with the stance when almost everybody else has come out with the stance. So again, Jerry Jones speaks once, and it's all about him.
always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Jerry Jones again, taking the spotlight and putting it on himself.
And to get back to my Mike McCarthy point for a very, very quick second, Freddie Kitchens was hired as a head coach last year for Cleveland when they could have gotten Mike McCarthy. Freddie Kitchens was immediately fired, and Jay, they have a much better replacement in
Kevin Stefanski. And guys, is a fan of a team that faces the Browns twice a year and has a rivalry that goes back decades. Any change to their team always interests me, especially when that change is at the top. Now, look, I was never convinced move to be the Browns head coach. He was fine as an offensive coordinator. It looked like he was starting to build something with Baker Mayfield and company. But when he was promoted to head coach, the offense stagnated and the team overall regressed. He was in over his head, and it showed in the team's performance both on and off the field, culminating with a certain incident with a team that I root for. Helmetgate. I have often said that the Haslams are the most coolest owners in all of the NFL. They can never seem to make up their minds as to what type of organization they want to be and what type of head coach will best serve their plan. All of this takes a long way around to me being interested to see if the former Minnesota offensive, coordinator can break the cycle, or if he'll just be the latest to have the cycle break him. Especially since for the second year in a row, the Browns are taking a risk on a guy who has no head coaching experience and has not been a coordinator for that long. The comparisons to Kitchen are unavoidable. What's interesting to note, guys, is that Stefanski was up for the job last year, and he was the choice of chief strategy officer Paul DePodesta, but Jimmy Haslam overruled him. This time, DePodesta gets his man. Now, Stefanski was hired because the Browns believe he can get Baker Mayfield back on track after a sophomore season that was more of a step backwards than a step forwards. And they believe that the scheme he'll implement will put the team's talented offensive players in the best position to make plays. Something to keep in mind regarding that was that Stefanski was responsible for Kirk Cousins' most efficient season as a passer by some metrics and the best offense by points per drive that Cousins ever led. Now, Stefanski has years of working under or alongside a variety of respected offensive coaches, from Andy Reid to Brad Childress to Gary Kubiak. The Kubiak-Shanahan influences were all over the Vikings offense, which Stefanski was the play caller for. It'll be interesting to see how much there'll be of Baker Mayfield running play action and naked bootlegs and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt on outside zone stretch run plays. What will also be worth watching, guys, is how the Browns utilize the tight end. Stefanski used multiple tight ends on a league-high 57% of snaps last season when he was calling the plays for the Vikes. The running backs and the proven wide receivers were still the stars of the show, and he has both in Cleveland, but the tight end was very much a key to the offense. The Vikings were just one of 3 teams that ran the ball more than they passed it over the course of the season, but Cousins still threw for over almost 4,300 yards while amassing a 97.4 passer rating. Power run game sets up the play action, and the threat of Stephon Diggs getting deep often left the middle open for the intermediate passing game. Now, this is a model the Browns can actually utilize. It's also the primary reason that they locked up Austin Hooper on a deal that includes $23 million in guarantees, why they've been talking up David Njoku despite the fact that he sounds like he wants out of Cleveland, and drafted Harrison Bryant in the 4th round. The Browns have surrounded Baker Mayfield with a skill position group that on offense, on paper, is absolutely loaded. You substitute Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry for Diggs and Adam Thielen, plus the tight ends, and there's reasons to be optimistic on defense. And despite Myles Garrett's shenanigans last year, he is the focal point of a defense that is rising and has several solid players of their own. Now, look, the big thing for Stefanski, guys, will be what he may have learned from Kubiak about everything else it takes to be a head coach. Things like organizational leadership, roster management, building a culture, and relationship with players. Kubiak excelled in these areas as a head coach, and those are areas that previous Browns head coaches have clearly been lacking in recent years. Stefanski has a tough job ahead of him, but I think Browns fans, like Nisa's husband and father-in-law, can feel a little better about Stefanski than they did about Freddie Kitchens. See, there are those comparisons again, guys.
Yeah, when you think about Freddie Kitchens, look at the locker room last year. I mean, you think about this, a locker room that has Odell Beckham involved, and Beckham was actually on his best behavior last season, which tells you everything about that Browns organization.
And his worst stats, by the way, just to let you know.
Yeah, his worst stats of the year. And he was not the troublemaker for a change. But then you think about this, look, Baker Mayfield was maybe got a little big-headed off the field. You know, I saw more of him in commercials than in football games, actually doing well. I mean, look, for what it's worth, Baker Mayfield obviously could step back. The offensive line play did not help for obvious reasons. But Mayfield also struggled in year 2 when defenses figured out that, you know what, we keep Baker Mayfield in the pocket. He's not much of a passer after all, but he can't improvise. And obviously, you saw that his play and completion percentage struggled because of that. Now, Stefanski, if he comes in, he gets the locker room a little under control. They get Myles Garrett back. Like I said, Jay mentioned the whole helmet incident. He's gonna have to really establish the locker room and really find some leadership there, because if Baker Mayfield is gonna be that leader, he's got to show it, not just in moxie. He's gonna have to back it up with his play, and also be able to kind of keep guys focused on football, especially now, and what's going to be a season affected by a pandemic. So you think about it, you go into an organization that has only made the playoffs one time since its reintroduction into the NFL, 1999. He's got his work cut off for him. It's a history of disappointment and losing. And maybe it helps that the Cleveland Browns is getting rid of those AFL lookalike uniforms and kind of going back to basics and going back to the normal, clean Cleveland Brown outfits that we grew up looking at the Jim Brown era. So maybe that's a start.
Somewhere.
And you know what? A new beginning. As far as wardrobe, hopefully that transfer over to the field.
Yeah, and Jay mentioned it perfectly. And although Stefanski was only offensive coordinator for 1 year, you saw the best year out of Kirk Cousins, and the dissimilarities are endless. The running back situation really intrigues me because you put anybody back there. I know Dalvin Cook is just a wonder out there, but if you put anybody back there for Minnesota over the last few years, they've had success. And now you take 2 of the top 20 most talented running backs in the NFL, who both have completely different styles. I'm not looking at this team through the air. I'm looking through this team on the ground to possibly set up themselves in the air and to probably go over that offensive line, because, again, there's just talent everywhere on that offense. And it's almost inexcusable to see in 2020 what you saw in 2019. Baker will obviously be the key, but the future does look bright for the Cleveland Browns now that they're not being coached by a complete imbecile. Yeah, anyway.
You hit the nail on the head, Rabbi. I think the fact that you got a guy who comes from a background where he is a little more run focused, and he will utilize those running backs to take some pressure off of Baker Mayfield, where last year all of the pressure was on Baker Mayfield.
And Chubb was one of the best running backs in the NFL last year, and he wasn't used properly.
Exactly.
Which is a shock. Anyway, let's move on to something that we've done almost every single year on this type of show. New faces in new places.
Old faces in
new places, but new faces in whatever. We see the same thing every year, but this year we had some major skill position players switching teams. Major skill position players. That's 2. Let's look at 3 such instances and what they mean to their new teams in 2020. Anthony, you're first up with Bill O'Brien's worst nightmare.
Yeah, you mentioned Bill O'Brien's mishaps as GM. How about trading away Deshaun Watson's favorite receiver and DeAndre Hopkins to Arizona, and now you just basically gave Kyler Murray Christmas come early.
For a second-round pick, by the way. Not a first, or second-round pick.
I mean, look, he is an all-pro wide receiver, 4-time Pro Bowler, and since he came to the league in 2013, he has amassed a career total of 8,602 yards on 632 receptions. That's 13.6 yards per catch, 54 touchdowns on 1,048 targets. In fact, he's done that with no quarterbacks before Deshaun Watson came to Houston, by the way. I mean, that's just how good he has been. Now you put him with Kyler Murray, the offensive rookie of the year, and a mentor in Larry Fitzgerald on the other side. You got a good weapon there. But how about this? DeAndre Hopkins probably has the best hands in the NFL if you throw it to him. He's been the most reliable target. I brought this stat up. He leads the category among active receivers since 2006. 225 straight receptions without dropping a single one. That's the longest active streak among receivers. The closest one is Randall Cobb with 121. So that tells you how good his hands are. And let's see, when lined up in slot situations, DeAndre Hopkins is even better as an inside slot receiver. He was the second highest target player in the NFL in those moments, behind only, let's see, Michael Thomas of the New Orleans Saints, who was also a Pro Bowler. So you put him with a Kyler Murray, who was young and developing, and a read option offense, who was a dual threat runner, and he can kind of blow off the top of a defense. I mean, Arizona, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year, but their offense is going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, honestly, guys, if you're Cliff Kingsbury, are you, like, right now doing the mad scientist thing?
He's got the evil right now. He's got the cat in his hand.
That guy, you got to believe that the minute Steve Keim told them that they fleeced Houston to get DeAndre Hopkins, that whatever, that Kingsbury, anywhere he's been, anytime he's been out and there's been a napkin, you got to believe he's been drawing up plays for Kyler Murray to get the ball into the hands of either of these guys, Hopkins or Fitzgerald. I mean, I think all of us did the "Are you effing kidding me?" when Bill O'Brien made this move. But you know what? There has been Hopkins has had an issue with O'Brien's offense for a while. Now, while he and Deshaun Watson had great chemistry and put up some numbers, overall, I don't think Hopkins was happy in Houston. So the change of scenery alone, I think, will be beneficial to him. It won't take him long, I think, to get used to playing with Kyler Murray, even though Murray is a completely different style of quarterback than Deshaun Watson. But at the same time, having a guy like Larry Fitzgerald opposite him and having Kingsbury, coming up with ways to get him into great position to make plays. Arizona, you're right, Anthony. Arizona may not make the playoffs this year, but the future looks great in the Valley of the Sun.
And Christian Kirk went for 730 yards last year, and to have him as your number 3 option, that is a very, very dangerous wide receiver trio. I was not a big fan of Kyler Murray's rookie year. I think he probably had a few more downs than he had ups, and I think he got the Rookie of the Year award because he performed decently as a number 1 draft pick. But DeAndre Hopkins just makes your team better. That's pretty much an obvious fact. That division is as loaded as any division in football by far. You have 3 coaches who went to a Super Bowl in that division within the last 5 years. So Arizona is going to be involved in a lot of shootouts in 2020. You would think the last time Cliff Kingsbury had this much offensive talent was at, Texas Tech. So this is going to be a very interesting season for the NFC West. All right.
Yep.
Jay, Philip Rivers.
The old face in a new place that I'm looking at is a guy who I never thought in a million years would ever change teams, and that's Philip Rivers. And while this move surprised me, like I said, I never thought Rivers would leave the Chargers, even with what he was saying, about the team moving to LA. I love this move for the Colts, a team that was reeling from the sudden retirement of Andrew Luck. Look, no disrespect to Jacoby Brissett, who is a solid, serviceable NFL quarterback, but the chance to get a potential Hall of Famer as your starter, even one who's closer to enshrinement than his prime, is a move you have to make. Now, this is a guy who's been to 8 Pro Bowls, is number 6 in career passing yards and touchdowns, number 9 in completion percentage, number 10 in career passer rating, and has played every game 14 years in a row. He's a leader in the truest sense of the word, and he hit the ground running once he and his family relocated to Indy in early June, talking with his new teammates inside and outside the facility, including Brissett, so he could kind of get himself up to speed on the differences in Frank Reich's offense between the last time he played for Reich and now, and his number 1 wide receiver, T.Y. Hilton, to kind of build the relationships that are critical to the success of a team. He also took the lead role in organizing player-only practices in the Indy area. Now, independent practices were a part of the effort to make up for lost practice time due to no OTAs and mini camps. Rivers, in particular, needed that time with his new teammates to whom he's never thrown to. That he took a central role in putting together these practices was another step in his effort to become that key leader as the starting quarterback must be. Now, look, they found out Andrew Luck was retiring 2 weeks before the start of last season, and they still managed mediocrity. That should count for something. Now, the Colts moved from Jacoby Brissett to Phillip Rivers. The change of quarterback means you're going to get a more high-risk, high-reward approach to offense, but Rivers gets to play behind arguably the NFL's best offensive line that returns all 5 starters. None of them missed a start in 2019, and they were one of the best pass-protecting units in the entire NFL. He also gets to play with a head coach in Frank Reich and an offensive coordinator in Nick Sirianni, both of whom he worked with when they were at the Chargers, where he had some of his best seasons, including a career-high 69.5% completion percentage in 2013. Now, Indy's going to be looking to see which one of its young wide receivers, second-year players Paris Campbell and Zach Pascal, or rookie Michael Pittman Jr. from USC, which one of them is going to provide a useful complement to Hilton, who needs to stay healthy for the Colts in order to have that dynamic, explosive offense that they're looking for. Colts used a second-round draft pick on running back Jonathan Taylor. They're going to pair him with Marlon Mack, and they have an underrated tight end group starting with Jack Doyle, who should benefit from playing with a quarterback who loves to throw to his tight end. Now, Wright got conservative last year with Brissett, but he's more likely to open things up with Rivers, who allows him to have a real versatile dynamic attack that he can call the way he wants, aggressively and creatively, to keep defenses guessing. Look, Rivers' accuracy, he was 8th among quarterbacks in expected completion percentage, should improve the passing game immensely. He just needs to cut down on the turnovers that plagued him last year. His overall adjusted interception rate was 4.4%, which was 32nd in the NFL. His interception rate when the Chargers were either leading or trailing by 1 possession was 3.9, which was second worst only to Jameis Winston. We know how many picks he threw last year. Overall, Rivers was in the bottom third in the NFL in negative plays produced. Thank you, Rabbi. That would, which is sacks, interceptions, and fumbles. Now, the Colts are willing to live with some amount of negative plays from Rivers if he's able to produce explosive plays, 20 yards or more downfield, at the same rate he did last year when he was 11th in the NFL. Look, guys, this version of the Colts, and looks like a playoff team, and they are what Rivers being, coming to this team means is that they are all in, and it's a team that's been under construction by GM Chris Ballard for the last 3 years, and now seems to be positioned to compete with the AFC's elite, especially with the dynamic upgraded QB1 with Rivers.
Yeah, I agree with Phillip Rivers. The thing is, he knows how to win games. He's a winner, without question. He's a leader. And you saw that with the Colts, even though, I think, like I said, the 7th time that Andrew Luck kind of caught them off guard. But considering the previous year, they were a playoff team. And it definitely set them back. You saw Jacoby Brissett, for what it's worth, played well enough. But he just couldn't get them over the top. And they had some issues on defense as well. You bring in Phillip Rivers, you get some leadership. So like I said, I think Phillip Rivers is a guy that could probably get the Colts maybe back in the playoff contention, particularly in the AFC South, where you don't know what's going to happen with Houston, with Bill O'Brien, aforementioned. Jacksonville is completely all over the place. And Tennessee, we don't know what's going to happen. Tennessee coming off a bit of a Cinderella run going to the AFC Championship game. That's a toss-up in that division. And Indianapolis definitely could be a dark horse that could come out winning the AFC South like they were able to do a couple of years ago.
Yeah. First of all, Phillip Rivers playing in front of an empty stadium this year, most likely. it won't be any different than when he is last year in LA. So at least that will be a good thing. Number two, I question this decision royally, because if you're making a move like this, you're playing to be a Super Bowl contender. They signed up for 1 year for $25 million. They actually have about $47 million invested in the quarterback position because Jacoby Brissett was signed to a nice deal after Andrew Luck retired. So he's making $21.4 million this year sitting on the bench. It's a good move if you want to win the AFC South. It's not a great move for your future because eventually you're going to have to draft a quarterback, and you don't possibly know what kind of quarterback you're going to get if you're in the late first round, which you expect to be. And you're not really competing with Baltimore. Baltimore's a little too talented. And you're not competing with Kansas City, although they beat Kansas City last year. Kansas City is a little too talented right now. So if you're competing for an AFC South, that's great. But if you're getting someone like Phillip Rivers, who's maybe got 2-3 years left in him at best, I don't think he's going to be a Tom Brady playing until he's 43. He has some kids he needs to take care of at home.
Well, that's why he may. He's got a lot of kids he has to take
He's
care
been
of.
paid enough that he can live with his kids at home. I think if I was paid enough, I could provide for my kids that much. But it's a weird move. I almost think it's a lateral move. I think you'll do obviously better in Indianapolis. How can you not? But the future probably still either out there, or you have a placeholder in Jacoby Brissett who will have a full season. It just is a weird move to me. Indianapolis will be a fun team this year, but I don't know what it means for the progress of their franchise. That's all I'm saying. Okay, let's move on to Stefon Diggs, who is leaving Minnesota, and what I thought was almost a more surprising decision than DeAndre Hopkins leaving Houston, because I know Diggs was complaining about his last years in Minnesota. If you remember specifically, they got out of the gate a little rusty in 2019 at 2-2, and the whole team kind of self-destructed. Diggs was talking about Kirk Cousins as a mediocre quarterback. Then they went into Giants Stadium and destroyed the Giants, and their season went back on track. The Minnesota Miracle will define Stefon's career, and he did that with Case Keenum as his quarterback, and Keenum almost had MVP-like numbers in 2017, 2018. Kirk Cousins was a lot better of a quarterback last year, but in the media and in every other stat or in any other light, he's still considered a mediocre quarterback. He'll never get the respect of living up to the 3-year, $81 million contract that he got. And I think Diggs just got frustrated over time about his role in the offense. He had 39 less catches in 2019 than he did in 2018, although he went for 104 yards, and he caught 8 balls of 40-plus yards or more. So when asked about the trade in camp, Diggs said that the first thing he thought about was Josh Allen. Then I started thinking about the defense they have here. So I don't really know too much, but I went in the mindset of I'm excited. I'm excited that I'm not playing in the same division as Tom Brady is what I'm thinking. Allen was the least accurate starting quarterback last year in throws of 20 yards or longer in 2020. And that is Diggs' bread and butter almost exclusively. Diggs is not a slot receiver, and if Diggs doesn't get the ball too much and has 60 to 70 catches like he did last year, he will not be happy, and he'll be complaining about Allen again like he did Cousins. Diggs doesn't have anyone his caliber at the position, too. John Brown did a very good job last year being a deep threat, but he's almost at best as a number 2 guy. Diggs gives you what the Bills need, and that is a home run ball. Are they a championship contender? Absolutely not. Are they a better team with him, and can they easily win the AFC East? How can they not be a better team when you have Stefon Diggs?
Yeah, I have to agree with that, Rob. I mean, look, I don't know that Diggs moved into a better professional situation. He was definitely playing in an offense that was better suited for his skill set. in tandem with Adam Thielen, though, that was one of the best wide receiver tandems in the NFL. Throw in Kyle Rudolph at tight end, Dalvin Cook. Going from Minnesota to Buffalo, to me, in terms of skills sets of the guys around him, that is a step backwards. In terms of a change of scenery, he was not happy overall. Maybe it's a step forward. Can he make Josh Allen a better quarterback with his ability to take the top off of a defense and, give them a Deshaun Jackson-like home run threat every single time he's out there? Maybe. Is he in a position where the division is more up for grabs and he's not playing, where he has a chance to do more in terms of advance in the playoffs than maybe he did in the NFC? Who knows? Maybe. Because even if you win that division, you eventually have to go through Baltimore or Kansas City, and I don't see this Bills team doing that, even with the addition of Stephon Diggs. Look, I hope in the long run that he's happy, but something tells me that the honeymoon period ain't going to last that long, and Stephon Diggs is not going to be a Buffalo Bill for the rest of his career.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Jay. I mean, I'm looking at his stats right now. Look at, let's see, 52 catches, 2015, 84, 2016, 64, 2017, 102 catches, obviously his career high, 2018, 63 last year. In the last 2 years, he's gone over 1,000 yards as a receiver. And last year, he actually had a career high in receiving yards. It seemed like, this guy really, and by the way, his yards per reception was a career high. So he kind of whined and complained about his role in the offense in a year where he actually put up career numbers. So, yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher that Stephon Diggs was not happy, and he might have actually gone to a worse situation than he had with Minnesota because, you said it. He had Thielen, he had Kyle Rudolph, that, other targets, and Dalvin Cook, guys that defensive coordinators had to worry about. In Buffalo, you have Stephon Diggs. Who else on the other side is going to attract the attention?
This is what I'm saying.
John Brown is definitely a pretty damn good receiver in his days.
Yeah.
He's
but
number two.
But this is the thing. I think the question, I don't know that Stephon Diggs is a number one receiver. Even if he's in that role.
He absolutely is.
I'm sorry. I don't think he is because his big skill is taking the top off of a defense, and he does it as well as anybody in the NFL. Can he do the things that Adam Thielen does as a number one wide receiver? And let's make no mistake about it. Adam Thielen is a wide receiver one. He does what all wide receiver ones do. And Diggs, I don't know that he has the complete skill set that is required to be a number one wide receiver in the way that some of these guys in the NFL are, like a Hopkins, like a Green, like a
Julio Jones, for example. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. He is not a true number one receiver. Is he a great deep threat? Yes. But you know what? I don't think that's enough because the guy on the other side is not a guy that scares defensive coordinators the same way. It's a difference when you are one with a lesser two, when then you are a great two with a solid one. And that, to me, I don't think he's going to put up the same numbers because he doesn't have a better quarterback, and defenses will be focused more on him than they have ever been in his career.
Well, yeah, that's perfectly fine, but by your definition, there's only 9 or 10 wide receiver ones in the NFL.
There's
wide receiver one
wide receivers, better number
20.
one. Yeah, there's not that many, and he's not at that level. I don't even think he's as good as Thielen. I think
he is as good as Thielen because he provides a different skill set as Thielen. You can't really compare the two. Thielen is a little more dependable on the 5 to 10 yard routes, which is perfectly fine. But also, Thielen got injured last year, so you don't actually know what the future holds with Thielen, and you don't know what the future holds with Stephon Diggs. It's a smaller sample size. He had a lot of quarterbacks that has thrown to him over the last few years.
That's why I don't. But you know what? But again, all of this and what he's leaving Minnesota to go to Buffalo, and he's going to have there is why I don't think he's going to be in Buffalo for that long. I don't think you're going to see him spend the rest of his career there because unless Josh Allen ridiculously improves, he's not going to be happy.
Yeah, like I said, though, I think it's going to be more on Josh Allen than it's actually going to be on Diggs himself.
Yeah, Allen has to improve.
Okay, so we're running short on time, so it's time to talk about the C word. It's a rite of passage almost every week on this show, but we have to talk one more time about COVID. With the success so far of the NBA and NHL bubble and the failure of MLB's non-bubble, it makes a lot of the public a bit skeptical that we're going to see a full 17-week season in 2020, and the NFL hasn't really made any adjustments to the schedule to think that the travel isn't going to be any different. There has been one major elimination by the NFL in 2020, and that is the entire preseason. Jay, with all of that and the COVID protocols that the NFL has put in place, is the public right to be skeptical?
You know what, guys? I think the NFL has a chance. Now, look, not as good of a one as I gave the NBA and the NHL. Look, the bubbles that they're playing, these guys are playing, those guys are playing in, have largely held. But I give the NFL possibly a slightly better chance than MLB right now with the way things have, like, devolved over there. Training camps isolate the players and staff. So, in essence, it's a form of a bubble that has a chance of working. With no preseason, the only travel is from home to the facility, which can make it easier to adhere to the NFL's COVID-19 protocols if these guys act like the adults that supposedly they've been doing the entire offseason. Look, in terms of how no preseason, will impact teams and their ability to judge where players are at in terms of making the team. Now, look, guys, college football does it every year, and somehow they manage to make it work. Look, without games, coaches will have to get creative, but it's rare that a team that has that many position battles that need to be decided before camp breaks. I think you'll see more scrimmage-type scenarios to get that game day feel, especially for the presumptive starters and the number twos who expect to get the most regular playing time. And contrary to what most fans think, preseason games are rarely the reason a position battle is decided. It does help, but it's not the be-all, end-all in terms of getting cut or not. Most players who are not locked into a spot can do as much to impress the coaches during practices and film study as they can with the limited reps they may get in preseason games. I also think the expanded practice squad will allow the coaches to really focus on the players they think have a better than average shot to be a part of the team. So while they'll have to get creative with how to gauge player development, I think having to trim the overall roster down to just 69 from 80 or 90 will be a little easier with the 4 extra practice squad slots. Look, the good thing about the NFL, it's played weekly. 7 games between, in between 7 days between games is room and time to handle things that go wrong. So that gives me a wee bit of hope that they may be able to pull off a season. But considering all that's involved when an NFL team's travel, the sheer amount of people required, not to mention the physical contact that happens during an actual game, that wee bit of hope is very, very wee.
Yeah, I was watching Hard Knocks. I would see the previewing the 2 LA teams, the Chargers and the Rams respectively, and you saw how COVID is affecting the training camps for both teams. You saw how with the Rams that they're spread, they're having this huge, massive acre of land for footballs against social distance. They had the weight facility, the training facility, and everything outdoors. Everything's been sanitized. You saw the Chargers. They have strict rules and protocols. Players getting tested very frequently. You're seeing that. You're seeing basically like what the protocols is. They had to actually change a few of the things, National Football League, because Matthew Stafford actually had a false positive test. Yeah. So they had to tweak a few things as far as testing, and what the standard procedure is that you have to get 2 negative tests in a row before you can really join your team. So you're going to see a lot of that. No preseason games. It's going to be different. You saw it on the show. Cut downs had to be made without really any practices or any games to really go by. Low risk, no contact practices, drills. The first couple of weeks, you can't go on the pads till maybe the 3rd week, and even then, it's no contact. You're seeing, the union negotiators, uniform safety procedures. The Denver Broncos have a sanitizing shower that the players and the staff have to walk through before they go into the field. You're seeing a lot of things that's been affected by COVID. The test is going to be when teams have to travel to another city because they're not in a bubble right now. We saw in Major League Baseball how much of that disaster have been so far, despite the fact that they're still playing games, and you have to rely on the players themselves. I mean, the irony in this is that the NFL players who are so portrayed as being party goers are the ones who are kind of been on their best behavior so far, and the Major League ball players who have been known to be kind of boring off the field are the ones getting themselves into situations where now they're being affected by COVID. Or in the case of Cleveland, they have to optionize their players for a few days because they can't behave themselves. Look, it's going to be a difficult situation. But as far as the training camps are concerned, they're doing what they can as far as safety, obviously. Even the vending machines, that they want you to open it they got foot handles instead of touching it with your hands. So that was something that the Chargers put into place. And obviously their head coach, Anthony Lynn, did test positive for COVID. So obviously there's a coach in the National Football League. There's a couple of others, Doug Peterson with Philadelphia as another example, who have firsthand experience of dealing with COVID. They can definitely pass on to the players as far as being careful. I think that's going to definitely help as well. So it's going to be I give them a little bit of hope in the fact that they do have, time to kind of play games, or even because there may not be college football games, push games back, especially like them Thursday night games where they can maybe push it back to maybe a Friday or a Saturday, which may be a little more pleasable than a quick turnaround from a Sunday to a Thursday that most teams has hated an awful lot since this whole Thursday night regular schedule have started. So it's going to be I'm going to be keeping my eye on when the season starts and say your Steelers come to MetLife Stadium to play the Giants to start the season. We know they're not going to be fans in the stadium. Nope. We know that the city of New York, it was once upon a time the epicenter of the pandemic. And now, they have the low numbers, and it's always knock on wood when you think of COVID because reading today, a neighborhood in Brooklyn, Sunset Park, has a surge in cases. So it can change almost any time. Yeah. It's such a fluid situation. You keep your fingers crossed that the players themselves can behave themselves, do what they have to do, go to the practice facility, go home, to the safety of their homes, their families. Don't put yourself in a situation where you may actually be around someone who may be positive. You saw the players on the field even wearing masks frequently. These are the times that we're living in, and it's going to take a lot to get used to. But like I said, that first test is going to be when teams have to travel to another city.
Yep. Yeah, and they're going to be tested daily until September 5th. Yep. I'm curious on why they're not being tested daily after that, but I'm sure a lot of plans are put in place. It's going to be a big test for Roger Goodell, too, because, again, when you're in this situation, you're going to eventually have this hill. It's just a question of what you do when you get to the hill. But I think NFL will be safe, and I actually think they're going to get their season done for a few things. Number one, baseball, their incidents of COVID outbreaks have only traced back to idiots, like the Marlins who went to Atlanta to party, like the Cardinals who went to a casino. And that's why those outbreaks have happened. It's not
Cleveland Indians who were stupid.
Yes, it's not because of sanitation issues. It's not because of playing ball. It's because they decided to be idiots. And then the Cleveland situation obviously is there, but it looks like that's been contained.
By the way, on Hard Knocks, those two teams used the Miami Marlins as a perfect example of what not to do the moment you step away from the team facilities. So exactly. I'm quite sure they pounded that whole episode. They pounded it into the players' skulls.
Yeah, and I think again, time has helped out the NFL a ton because they can learn from everybody else's mistakes. And if it doesn't work out because of situations like that, so be it. Also, if you have 12 to 13 players on an NFL team that have COVID, you let them recover, but you have people to replace them. So an outbreak has to be, for a team to be sidelined, has to be about 20 to 25 people. And I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen if the NFL even has a remotely checked, or it has this remotely in check. And also, the NFL is going to need to take extraordinary circumstances to cancel or stop the season. And we know this. There's going to be pressure on them to keep the season alive. And even if there is an asterisk, even if 4 teams are eliminated from the entire season, the NFL is going to finish this season come hell or high water. I don't know how, but they will. And I just see it. Even if with baseball continuing to happen, despite 3 teams basically losing a week of games, and I think it was actually more considering all of that. I think that the NFL, again, is in a better position than we think when it comes to COVID.
Yeah, Rabbi, I have to agree with you because, I mean, you think about it. With baseball, these guys who are traveling, you're going to a city, you're staying there anywhere from 2 to 4 days where you are in a foreign city, in a hotel, in a different environment. NFL teams, when they travel, they they get there on the Saturday, they play on Sunday, they're on the plane Sunday night, they're back in, and they're back in there sleeping in their own beds, come, Sunday night into Monday. So I think because there's that much structure, even with the traveling when you're the visiting team to and from, and because they spend basically not even 72 hours, barely 48 in the city they're visiting, I think there's less chance for people to be stupid. I hope.
And we'll see.
Yeah, we don't need an episode. We don't need an episode of Ballers and another Ricky Jarrett situation coming out in a nightclub. I think that's what the NFL don't want to happen.
Well, let's just hope that nobody gets stupid and pulls a Lou Williams when they visit Atlanta.
Oh, Lord.
Even if the wings aren't that good.
This episode of On the Sports Line is sponsored by Magic City.
Well, order them over the phone, have them delivered. Don't go there.
All right, before we get off the
Uber Eats.
There you go.
Before we get off the tracks, this ends another edition of On the Sports Lines, our pigskin-related edition of this show. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, my name is Stephen Rabinowitz. Facebook.com/On the Sports Lines is where you get content for the show, and you can see this show on some Thursdays when I can actually get the show up on the internet. You can see the show all the time, though, the next day on youtube.com/On the Sports Lines and on Twitter at
ONTH Sports Lines.
We don't know what we're going to talk about next Thursday, but with a bunch of local teams in the playoffs like the Nets and most likely the Islanders, who would be playing Game 5 when we're on the air, we have a lot to talk about. So it's a very, very driven time right now in the sports world, and we thank you for listening. For On the Sports Lines, good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.